Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Run the Nation right here, TYT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Had a last minute adjustment of the lighting, so we're here. Hey, hopefully everybody had a great weekend. I certainly did. Had a very interesting, at least Saturday to be sure. Maybe I will save that for a post show if I ever get to do one. Anyway, like I said, very interesting. But we've got a lot of great stories for you today to come back on this Monday. We're going to talk about the Trump infrastructure plan that they have. Then we've got the intelligence agencies, the so-called deep state, on whistleblower protections. It's a huge, huge story in the Daily Beast. We're going to talk about that. Then we have a West Virginia Democrat that's fighting against oil and gas. And basically called out all the people that were owned by fossil fuels. It's awesome. Then, of course, we have OxyContin. We'll talk about Purdue Pharma. And then we have a Trump judicial nominee that is controversial, to say the least. So, got a lot of great stories here around the nation. It's going to be an excellent, excellent show today. So stay with me for the next hours. We go around the nation for some of the best stories and progressive political commentary on the web. If you haven't already, please give us a like and a share. That is definitely appreciated. Sharing is caring, helps the show get around to more people. And that, of course, is what we need to do. Another announcement, not that it matters too much here on the YouTube show, but we're also on Steam It, so that's interesting. I'm going to be putting up my clips there as well. I have no idea how the thing works, so I just thought that was an interesting announcement. The more places that we put up our content, the better, and that, of course, is a YouTube competitor. So we're still going to have videos here. We're going to have videos there. We've got videos up on Facebook, so we're getting ourselves around. And that is the point. All right, everybody. Let's move on. Is there? Are you guys hearing me? Is there sound? Hopefully there's sound. There should be anyway. Okay. I'm guessing y'all hear me because I'm getting more likes, so it works. Okay. So let's start off with infrastructure. It is infrastructure week after all, so let's kick that off with the Trump plan. Okay. So one of the things President Trump ran on is fixing our infrastructure. Great. Hey, I agree with that. It's actually one of the things that I think everybody from the left and the right agree on. Hey, we got to fix our roads. We got to fix our bridges. We got to fix our water pipes, our crumbling infrastructure. In fact, we're rated at a D+ for our infrastructure. I believe it's the Army Corps of Engineers that goes and takes a look at the nation's infrastructure, and they rate it from a scale of A to F. We're at a D+. Congratulations, America. We have a D+. We're barely passing when it comes to infrastructure. Wait a minute, we're an incredibly wealthy nation. We've got all this money. We've got all these resources. Why the hell are we a D+? Well, it's because we put all our money into tax cuts and into the military. We can build up other nations, can't build up our own homes. Okay. So our infrastructure is falling apart. Now, President Trump, when he talked about infrastructure, I'm like, great. Okay, here we go. President Trump's talking about rebuilding infrastructure. Wonderful. Bernie Sanders also talked about infrastructure during the election, or I should say during the primary, against Hillary Clinton. I don't know if Hillary Clinton talked about infrastructure. Doesn't really matter now. It's a moot point. But at least that's two things that, again, these presidential or these candidates had talked about. So it's an important issue among most people, because we don't like to see our water fall apart, our water pipes, and we don't like to see our roads fall apart and our bridges and things like that. So it's very, very important. Now, The problem is that the Trump infrastructure plan is terrible. Now, let me point out why. Now, what it would do is that it would basically give private corporations control of roads and bridges. Now, how would they do that? It's through the way that it was funded. Now, CBS explains that Mr. Trump's plan relies almost entirely on funding from entities outside of the control of the federal government. Now, of that $1.5 trillion, only $200 billion of it would come from federal funding. So, new federal funding, he promises a $1.5 trillion infrastructure bill. We're only footing $200 billion of it. Well, where's the rest of the $1.3 trillion coming from? Well, that's an interesting question. Now, the White House, they say, would offset the new spending with unspecified cuts in other areas of the budget. The rest is expected to come from state and local governments and private investment. Oh, that means that private corporations, through a mix of maybe public-private partnerships or just private investment, will fund these projects. So in between that and the state government. So however many billions of dollars, this $1.5 trillion total package is going to come from private interests. That means, well, look at it this way. So these private corporations, do you think they're going to fund infrastructure out of the kindness of their own heart? They're like, oh my God, look at the roads. They're in such bad condition. Why don't we do something about it? Why don't we be good corporate citizens, because we're people, obviously, and fix these roadways? Because look, we use the roadways. We actually use it far more extensively than regular traffic, and that commercial traffic through our trucks and things like that, ferrying goods back and forth throughout the different stores and things like that. So let's fix the roads. Let's invest in our country. Do you think that's going to happen? Oh, that's a good one. No, of course not. You know what's going to happen? Look, any company that makes an investment is going to expect something in return, a return on investment. I mean, that's what? Corporate 101, right? Business 101. If you're going to invest in something, there has to be some sort of return. Now, no doubt, the PR might be decent. Slap your name on a highway. Imagine, Goldman Sachs Highway. I'm not saying that they're one of the people that are going to invest, but who else could you think of that has excess money and a penchant for wanting to control everything? Just saying. Or Walmart Highway. But there's more than that. Again, these companies want to see a real return on investment. So in the case of building a toll road or... Oh, I gave it away already. Sorry. In the case of building a road and a bridge, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to do toll roads. They're going to put up toll booths, and they're going to charge you to use their roads. Hey, man, look, we invested. We rebuilt this road. We fixed it up. It's ours now, and we're going to make our money off of it. We invest $200 billion or $300 billion or however many billion dollars into these roads. We're going to make some profit. That's what this is. Now, you don't believe me? According to a senior administration official in a background call with reporters on Saturday, they said, quote, the president's plan encourages new revenue streams on the state and local level. Okay. That includes taxes and usage fees. So again, this is just with the state funding, right? We're going to get new revenue streams to pay for this road at the state and local level, meaning usage fees. So the state might also put up their own toll booths and charge you taxes. Now imagine you're getting charged taxes and tolls for paying for that road because the federal government doesn't want to do it. And that's what this comes down to. So, hey, look, you're getting double taxed on this one. Now, remember, too, that in many states, corporations happen to get special tax rates and breaks. Meaning that as they're paying less of the taxes, you're paying more. You're paying the taxes and fees, and now you're also likely going to end up paying for toll roads. Now, another senior administration official tells CBS that, quote, taxes are one of the ways that state and local governments could raise revenues. but are certainly not the only ways. They can sell bonds, use public-private partnerships, create user fees. We're pretty agnostic to the way that they raise revenue. Uh-oh. They're pretty agnostic as long as nobody touches their beloved corporations. They don't care who foots the bill, which will almost certainly be you. And again, with those public-private partnerships, these corporations that make an investment, they will also likely put up toll roads. Now, here's the other thing, right? Now, we already know that the $1.5 trillion, most of it's not coming from federal spending. Most of it, like I said, is coming from state and private investment. Now, only about $200 billion comes from the federal government. But again, $200 billion, not to mention $1.5 trillion alone, isn't nearly enough to tackle the problem that is our infrastructure. In fact, according to the American Society of Civil Engineers, they said last year that the U.S. would need to invest $4.59 trillion by 2025 to improve the country's infrastructure. Now, that in itself is a lot of resources. It's enormous. Now, 1.5 trillion, again, that's not even half the cost that it would take. And by the way, we cavalierly just gave $1.5 trillion to the richest corporations. And think about that in the form of tax cuts. Gave another $165 billion to the military. Now we spend over $700 billion on bombing people. What we have is a spending problem, not an allocation problem. So we could come up with that $4.5 trillion to spend on the roads, on infrastructure. We just don't want to. The politicians don't want to. And again, Trump offering up $200 billion and that's it, and letting the states take care of the rest is ridiculous. Now, the White House, of course, argues that no, it's more than funding. No, it's it's only one component of the infrastructure plan. No, they said at least as important as a plan to shorten the permitting process for projects so that obtaining a permit takes no longer than 2 years, according to one administration official. They said the current permitting structure is overly concerned with preventing litigation and not enough on outcomes. So their other solution to this is, let's go and let's just change the permitting process. Now, why does that matter? Well, because the permitting process makes sure that we vet people that are actually able to do the job. Now, I don't have faith in the Trump administration to do that. And I have a couple of examples that back that up. For one, they contracted a tiny company with 2 employees out of Ryan Zinke's hometown. This is Whitefish Energy. And they contracted them to work on the energy grid for Puerto Rico. 2 people. Never took on a big infrastructure project like that before. And you wouldn't believe how much they charged overhead, too. So we detailed that on another show. So that was one of the companies that got contracted. Now, of course, they lost their contract later on. And then a news story came out where there was a woman that was contracted to send millions of meals, again, to Puerto Rico, who had no employees and no previous experience with disaster relief. And she did it wrong. They were supposed to have a few million meals, 50 million meals perhaps. I think she sent out a total of 50,000. And they were wrong. They were wrong. So those picks do not bode well for the administration's ability to hand out permits. And yet they want to shorten the permitting process. Now look, there's a legitimate issue with some permits taking too long. But again, you want to make sure you vet the people who actually do the things that you're paying them for and to make sure that they can actually handle those projects. So when it comes to infrastructure projects, I want to know that my money is actually going to go to fixing that road, to fixing that pipeline, water pipeline, and fixing everything else that needs to be fixed. But, the administration, again, is looking to do what they're going to do, right? What they're doing is that they're basically cheaping out on the side of the federal government and saying, hey, you guys handle it. We already blew a $1.5 trillion hole in the deficit. you know, it's up to you. It's on you, man. We're going to call it an infrastructure bill, but it's really not. Now, there's one more piece to this that I think is important, and that's the impact on rural communities. Now, one of the criticisms is when private corporations decide they want to invest in infrastructure projects, where do you think they'll focus on? Ain't going to be Hicksville, USA, with a population of 1,500 people. No, of course, it will be main roads in big cities. Now, those are the places where they can get most return on investment because more people will use that road. Do you think they're going to set up a toll road in the middle of nowhere? No, of course not. So, a lot of these places that need infrastructure the most, roads and bridges, nobody's going to set things up there. Now, maybe the Trump administration is going to use that $200 billion to help those areas. I don't know. Honestly, again, I have no faith. So, and speaking of investment, right? They also said that the plan aims to invest in rural infrastructure, and something that doesn't relate to brick and mortar infrastructure, workforce training. The proposal, according to a senior administration official, will remove obstacles for people who are looking to go into skilled trades, change licensing requirements so workers can more easily move from state to state, and expand apprenticeships. Now, again, all that sounds great in theory, but again, I don't know how it's going to shape up. Okay, I'm all for more skilled trades. I'm all for expanding apprenticeships and things like that. And again, all well and good, but that doesn't solve the problem of our failing infrastructure. Look, those states and local areas, they need federal funding. They need more federal funding in order to rebuild infrastructure. And I think what little funding they'll get from the federal government will not nearly be enough. And the private companies, like I said, will not invest anywhere where they are not assured to make a return on their investment. So these small towns and localities are essentially screwed. So as much as I love the idea of an infrastructure plan and hope that Trump would deliver, the fact is, the facts coming in on the ground say that this is basically nothing more than a scam that will enrich corporations at your expense. And that's exactly why we now refer to the Trump administration as the new swamp. Okay. It's getting very swampy in here. All right, let's move on. So this is a pretty big story here. I'm going to try to work through it. So the Daily Beast here with a report about how U.S. intelligence agencies, referred to, of course, by some as the deep state, have been retaliating against whistleblowers who often call out, of course, waste, fraud, and abuse inside of the agency and end up being, like I said, retaliated against. Now, this report also shows how these agencies, the CIA, FBI, NSA, etc., have been bearing an investigation about those abuses and about this retaliation. So let's break it down here. Now, this is according to Kevin Polson, who wrote for the Daily Beast. And he reports that the nation's top intelligence watchdog had recently put the brakes on a report last year that uncovered whistleblower reprisal issues within the American spy agencies. Now, the move concealed the finding that the agencies, including the CIA and the NSA, were failing to protect intelligence workers who report waste, fraud, and abuse or criminality up the chain of command. Now, you listen to this and you think, oh, intelligence agencies not being accountable to the law? Unthinkable. Now, of course, I have a big problem with some of our intelligence agencies and what they're doing or what they have traditionally done. The fact that the NSA basically has spy tools, spying in on Americans, things like that. The FBI, of course, traditionally targeting the left-wing groups and things like that. And, of course, whistleblowers going after people like Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden. Big problems, right? So this doesn't surprise me in the least. Now let me get into more of the details. Now, the investigators looked into 190 cases of alleged reprisal within 6 agencies and discovered a not-so-shocking pattern. In only one case out of the 190 did the agencies find in favor of the whistleblower, and in that case took 742 days to complete. Other cases remained open longer. The findings were remarkably consistent. They said over and over again the intelligence inspectors ruled that the agency was right and the whistleblower was, of course, always wrong. Wow! Big surprise! No, we're right, they're wrong, of course. Move on. Not shocking. Now, this report followed a near 6-month-long inspection run out of the Intelligence Community Inspector General's office. Now, before its completion for this report, the new acting head of office, Wayne Stone, decided, you know what, I don't like this report. It is not favorable enough. I'm going to pull the plug. In fact, Polson writes, Stone shut down the whistleblowing inspection just days after taking over for Charles McCullough III, who'd served as the Intelligence Community's Inspector General from the day the office was founded in 2010 until his retirement in March of last year. Now, why did he do that? Well, he claims that's a pretty good reason. One of the inspectors, they said, was a whistleblower that was suing the CIA. Now, the man who is suing the CIA went by the alias of James Pars. Now, Pars had served in war zones in Iraq and Afghanistan, with South America, and also even in Baghdad and other places. This guy was a career agent, right? He's seen a lot of things, been a lot of places. In fact, one former intelligence colleague says of his biography, quote, he understands what happens in the field. He's been in the mud and the blood. So, look, Pars has served the CIA for, decades, and never really had a beef with him, right? They said that Pars regrets little, save for the long stints away from his wife and young daughter. So that's important context because it shows that he's not going after the agency for no reason. There is a good reason he's decided to go after the agency. And it says, on 2 occasions he had clashed with a superior and had felt mistreated by the CIA's bureaucracy going forward. Now, one of the issues is documented here where he was serving at Bagram Air Base. Now, at Bagram, Pars allegedly had issues with his new boss, the chief of the base, who he believed was running a command like a college dormitory. As Pars later wrote in a court filing, she allegedly adopted favorites within her staff and placed her personal needs of cooking, baking, socializing, entertainment, exercise, and shopping above the needs of the mission, often going days and sometimes more than a week without meeting with key personnel. Now, Pars' most serious complaint charged that the base chief frequently led her personnel on unnecessary errands, food, shopping, or to the gym, that took them through parts of the base hit frequently by Taliban rocket fire. One such excursion allegedly crossed a flight ramp that was hit by a rocket just 10 minutes later. Following procedure, Pars decided to send his concern up the chain of command. Word of his complaint got back down to the base chief, who allegedly retaliated on a scale that ranged from petty, assigning him to duty as a compound noise monitor, to the serious writing a critical performance review of Pars, faulting him for poor communication skills and lack of leadership. Soon after, the CIA station chief in Afghanistan issued a short of tour cable, reporting that Pars no longer had the confidence of its chief of base. The cable cut short Pars' 1-year detail after only 4 months and sent him home to Virginia with a reduction of pay. Upon his return, Pars spent months applying for new CIA assignments that would fit his experience and qualifications, but with the poor performance review and short of tour cable on his record, he was rejected again and again. His finances went badly, and of course that led to his family life going badly. His wife left the country, taking his daughter with her. He was a Cuban-born American. And Pars appealed to the Equal Employment Opportunity Office, worked through the CIA bureaucracy to try to clear his name, but finally, failing all that, he lodged a whistleblower reprisal complaint in April of 2015. Now, this seems very dramatic, more of a he said, she said kind of thing, a lot of alleged complaints going on here. Nonetheless, he claims, no, I'm a whistleblower. I didn't like the way that she was running her base. She went after me for it. So I had the right to put in that complaint. I had the right to be protected. Well, the problem is they didn't have that protection. Now, to what do I refer? What kind of protection? Well, back in 2012, President Obama signed a policy directive called the PPD-19. Now, that prohibits intelligence agencies from punishing workers who report abuses through approved government channels. Now, under Trump, that directive still stands. Now, among other things, PPD-19 requires the Office of Inspector General at each agency to carry out an investigation when a worker files a complaint about, of course, retaliation to lawful whistleblowing. If, after investigating, the OIG finds no evidence of reprisal, the whistleblower can appeal up to the intelligence agency, Community Inspector General, who can choose to impanel a 3-person appellate board comprised of AGs from other agencies to go and see whether or not they confirm or affirm or disagree with the OIG's decision. Now, in this case, they didn't quite get to that. His case is still pending. But there are other cases. There were enough cases of reprisal for them to put together an investigative unit. Now, this investigative unit had 6 different investigators. Now, they found that these other investigations into reprisal never actually happened. One of the conclusions of this suppressed inspection from those investigators found that basically none of these investigations actually happened. Quote, absent a review process which adheres to mandated legal standards for reprisal investigations, the protections remain weak, with minimal chance for a complainant to have a reprisal complaint substantiated. From the data, it appears that PPD-19 has had no impact on agency reprisal investigations and or protections from complainants making protected disclosures. So the protections are there, but nobody follows them. And of course, nobody is holding these agencies accountable for them going after whistleblowers. Again, color me surprised, right? Now, Rob Johnson, former director of the ICIG under McCullough, confirmed the findings in an interview with the Daily Beast, attributing to some of the problems to the expected growing pains of implementing a new policy that I don't necessarily buy. But, hey, maybe it had something to do with it. The fact that maybe it took so long for some of these complaints to get recognized. But then there are a lot of them. Look, you can't explain away that the fact that 190 of these complaints, out of that, only one of them was actually ruled on the side of the complainant. They can't all be bad. They can't all be without merit. From what it sounds like, the Bagram base, again, whether you believe his account or not, he is a CIA operative after all. Look, that seems like a situation where there was definite mismanagement. And again, it is your duty to report that mismanagement to make sure that this actually runs the way that it's supposed to. Now, let me go back to Johnson here. There's another quote. He said that we saw a couple of cases from some offices that showed that they didn't speak to witnesses that they should have, and that the cases had languished. And we saw cases where they took no action, whether it was systemic or not. Well, that's why we were doing the inspection. The inspectors found also endless obstacles to effective whistleblower protection within the spy agencies, according to documents from the proof. And there was no clear standard for conducting reprisal investigations. Even the standard of proof, probable cause, preponderance of evidence, was murky to the OIGs. The investigation manuals at most agencies also gave retaliatory probes only cursory attention. There were mixed incentives. The primary metric for weighing an OIG's effectiveness was how much the office saved taxpayers through its waste, fraud, and abuse investigations, and a successful whistleblower claim could cost the government money and in the form of back wages or attorney's fees. So all of that led to situations and these reprisal cases being ignored because, hey man, look, these are time consuming and they're expensive, we're not interested. And look, hey, look, we might even have a problem proving a connection between this performance review, for example, that was bad, reduced security clearance, or a mispromotion to the prior whistleblowing activities. So they had a hard time trying to prove correlation between the two things. So that's why they're doing that's why they did the investigation. That's why they did the inspection. Now, as they were going to release their official report, earmarked for Donald Trump's newly confirmed director of national intelligence, that's a man named Daniel Coates, they decided, no, we're going to crush it. We're going to squash this thing. You know why? Because it's incredibly unfavorable to us. What was in this report? In early April, rumors of Parr's lawsuit reached the IGIC's office. Under questioning, Parr's acknowledged that he was the pseudonymous plaintiff in the case. So what does that have to do with them crushing this inspection? Well, Parr's was one of the inspectors that was named to be on this. So there were 6 inspectors. Parr's was one of them. Parr's is suing the CIA over this. So they said, oh, conflict of interest. Let's get rid of him. Let's get rid of him. And let's also bury this report. Bury it. Now, you could agree that removing him from this investigation was fair because maybe you have a conflict of interest. But again, he was only one of 6 investigators who came up with the same conclusion. They all found evidence of retaliation against whistleblowers and the fact that the agency was doing very, very little to address these concerns. They can't all be wrong. But of course, because of this, and likely because it gave them an excuse, Stone ordered the entire inspection halted, according to sources for the agency. Data, files, memos, charts, and graphs were all locked down, and work on the final report stopped completely. And the official investigation was that the inspection had been tainted by Parr's involvement. Now, Johnson, going back to him, he has a quote. He said, "There's virtually nothing a single inspector could do to contaminate a report that relies heavily on verifiable numbers." He said, "Everything has to be backed up with data. There's not a lot of opinion on these reports." Some former ICIG officials believe that Stone used the Parr's affair as a pretext to kill an inspection that was producing inconvenient results. Quote, "Parr's was told to cease and desist, and they walked him out the door and buried the program," says one former ICIG official who worked with Parr's. Quote, "They pulled the carpet out from under him because they wanted an excuse to quash the report." Now take that for what you will. But I believe that 100% they crushed this report because they didn't want to be held accountable. Now this is a problem that is a part of every large agency that operates without proper accountability. What we need is to rein in these agencies. They have been operating too long without proper oversight. I'm not saying the president. I'm not saying what kind of accountability or oversight that I'm looking for. That's for people who are way smarter than me to figure out. But we got to do something. These agencies being able to go and crush these independent inspections, and to whether or not they're going after whistleblowers for calling things out, for calling out abuses of the chain of command, and doing it the way that they all say that they're supposed to, and then ruining these people's lives, it's not the way that we should be conducting business. It is the internal corruption inside of these agencies that is the huge, huge problem. Now, what we need, as I said, more accountability. Now, you think Donald Trump would jump at that, right? Because he's all over the deep state. It's like, oh, the deep state, they're after me, I hate them. Well, this would be a great time and reason to go and do more oversight. I'm not saying take control. What I'm saying is institute some independent oversight of these agencies so that maybe we can actually get some accountability. But of course, he's not going to do that. All he's done is, of course, push back against everything Russia, which of course won't solve this problem inside of our intelligence agencies. But again, I don't think he actually wants to solve that problem. I think he wants to demagogue, and I think he wants to basically push back against anything that might threaten his presidency, and that's it. Anyway. Let's move on here. Let's do the Trump nominee. Let's see. Since we're on the topic of Donald Trump. On Thursday, Republicans in the Senate Judiciary Committee, with the support of 4 Democrats, recommended a Senate vote for Kurt Engelhardt. Now, Kurt Engelhardt is a district court judge in Louisiana that has been nominated by Donald Trump to the 5th Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, that means that Engelhardt will be up for confirmation very soon. Now, why should it matter? Well, like a lot of Trump appointees, Engelhardt has a bit of a disturbing record when it comes to rulings. Now, I'm going to detail some of these rulings for you guys now. According to Salon, Engelhardt got national attention back in 2013 for his ruling in one of the most scandalous cases of racial injustice and police brutality in the 21st century. This is the Danziger Bridge shootings. Now, this happened following Hurricane Katrina back in 2005. Now, what happened is that New Orleans police officers, there were 4 of them, ended up shooting 6 unarmed African Americans, killing 2 and shooting the arm off of 1 victim. These victims were evacuating from the hurricane. One was even chased down and shot in the back by police officers as they were fleeing for their lives. Now, what in the hell were police officers doing shooting unarmed civilians that were fleeing from a hurricane? That alone is horrific, right? But what comes after is actually far, far worse. To conceal their guilt, the officers involved attempted to frame the victims as assailants. Oh, they're dangerous. It was them. They were the real threat. They were coming right for us. I mean, what are you going to do when there are African Americans that are coming after you? You don't shoot them. Come on, dude. They were unarmed. They were running for their lives. And instead, look, you should be able to run to the police if you have a problem. But you can't. You have to be running away from the police. And that's not even a guarantee that they won't shoot you in the back. Disgusting. So, look, again, the facts of this case, and they have already been convicted. This isn't something that hasn't gone to trial, that hasn't been adjudicated yet. No, this had gone through trial, and these police officers were convicted of murder, of killing these 2 people. This is not disputed, right? And part of what happened during that case is that they established that these police officers had then tried to cover up their crimes. So it's as heinous as it can get, right? And they were punished for it. Well, not as much as they should have. And this is where Engelhardt comes into play. Now, the cops originally received sentences ranging from 38 to 65 years in prison and an additional 6 years for another one that was involved in the cover-up. Now, Engelhardt thought that was a little too harsh. During the proceedings, he claimed there was, quote, an air of mendacity around the prosecution and complained that the plea deals prosecutors got from the cooperating witnesses prevented him from issuing lighter sentences to these officers. I'd go easy on these guys if I could. I mean, they're white guys just like me. Here we have convicted murderers who killed innocent people, were found guilty of not only killing them, but covering up their crimes. And you've got a federal judge saying, no, don't worry about it. Let's go easy on these guys. They don't deserve so many 35 to 64 years? No, of course not. No, they actually deserve less sentences. And guess what happened? That's exactly what they got. Salon explains that Engelhardt was able to get rid of the heavy sentences when it was discovered that 3 of the federal prosecutors had left, and this is very important, anonymous comments on a local website regarding the case, claiming that the comments created a prejudicial, poisonous atmosphere for the jury, even though there was no evidence that any of the jurors had actually read those comments. Engelhardt decided that was enough to throw out the convictions. Gone. Oh, 34 to 65 years. Nope, gone. Let's throw these out. Because you made an anonymous comment on a website that people may or may not have read. Come on, man. Now what happened? Well, the police were retried. You know what happened this time? They were still found guilty, but they had received 7 to 12 years for the murders and only 3 years for the cover-up. He got what he wanted. He's like, I thought these sentences were way too harsh on these poor police officers. So I want lighter sentences. And then he got the lighter sentences. Now you can say, well, look, come on, there's this one case that doesn't show that he's a terrible judge. It doesn't show that he's not fair to minorities or women. It doesn't show that he's a bad judge. Maybe he just felt really strongly in this case of the police officers. Well, this takes us to another decision called Truvia versus Julian, right? And again, the argument could be that he just wants lighter sentences for everybody. Well, in this case, Truvia versus Julian, Engelhardt had actually denied the civil rights claims of 2 African-American plaintiffs who were held in prison for 27 years before they found out that their constitutional rights were violated because exculpatory evidence had been withheld at their trial. So, in this case, Engelhardt dismissed the claim that the defendants had been victims of prosecutorial misconduct. So, you got these African Americans, right? These 2 African American plaintiffs. They had their civil rights denied because the evidence that was used to convict them and send them to prison for 27 years was withheld. What the hell? But when it came to the cops, posting anonymous comments was enough to taint this trial. But withholding evidence from the jury that would have proven possibly their innocence? No, that's fine. You dare to leave comments anonymously? Taints the trial. You withhold evidence, not tainting the trial. It's fine. I permit it. That's the kind of justice Engelhardt believes in. There's more. To make it worse, it's been reported that Engelhardt had dismissed women's complaints about sexual harassment without even giving the plaintiffs an opportunity to even present their case. In the 3 dismissals, Engelhardt argued that there was no need to try the cases because the incidents described to the plaintiffs were neither severe nor physically threatening and did not rise to the level of an objectively abusive environment. Now, let me get into context about what these complaints alleged. One of them included groping. Well, that seems to be abusive. Maybe you could argue that it's not severe. I would argue differently, but okay. Well, what about threatening? Well, another allegation was they would corner women at work and forcibly kiss them. That seems a bit threatening. That seems definitely a bit severe. But this one is even better. One of them had alleged that a man had threatened to break into a woman's house while they slept. That seems a bit threatening. Not only that, but there's some lesser stuff. Subjecting employees to back rubs against their will, pinching, playing porn videos in the workplace, and asking for sex from coworkers. So it's not nearly as severe as some of the other stuff, but definitely makes for a very uncomfortable workplace and one that you shouldn't have to be forced into being into. That is a complaint. And when the judge said, or saw these, are like, oh, no, that's fine. I mean, asking your coworkers for sex and playing porn in the office, that's Tuesday. It's gross, man. But obviously, he seems to have no empathy for African Americans or women at all. And plenty of empathy, funny enough, for cops. No wonder he is a Trump nominee. That is exactly what Donald Trump is looking for in a justice. Now look, if the Democrats, 4 Democrats advance this guy. 4 of them. If the rest of the Democrats do not challenge this guy, especially with the Me Too movement going on, then they're an absolute lost cause. But again, for Republicans, for Trump, this is exactly the kind of person that they can't wait to see making decisions in court. And looking at his records, it's pretty plain to see why. I'm going to take a quick break here. We got more stories, so stick around. Around the Nation. We'll be right back in a couple minutes. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show, Around the Nation, right here, TYT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. If you haven't already, please give us a like and a share on YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're listening to. Definitely appreciate it. Sharing is, of course, caring. So if you like the show, please give us a thumbs up. And also, if you are not already subscribed to the channel, please do so. We are roughly about 550 people away from hitting 70,000 subscribers. Holy crap. So please help us get to there if you haven't already. And thank you to those who already are. Big thanks, of course, to the patrons. Patreon.com/TYTNation if you want to support the show. Support independent progressive media. That is where you can go to support us. We do not get paid from corporate media. We depend on you guys. There ain't no $20 million investments in this show, that's for sure. I'd actually have a decent background. So, all right. Let's move on. We've got a couple of stories from West Virginia. Let's do the serious story first, and then we'll go to the West Virginia Democrat. It's probably the best story of the day. So, let's get to it. There we go. Now, Reuters is reporting that Purdue Pharma, which is one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in America, is deciding to cut its sales force and will now stop promoting opioids to physicians in response to both criticisms and, more importantly, lawsuits over its role in the opioid epidemic. Now, the drug maker has said it will inform doctors on Monday that its sales representatives will no longer visit physicians' offices to discuss its opioid products and will have now about 200 sales representatives. So they basically said, oh, we're going to cut our sales force in half from 400 to 200. They said in a statement, we have restructured and significantly reduced our commercial operation and will no longer be promoted opioids to prescribers. Now, they said that doctors with opioid-related questions will be directed to its medical affairs department. Its sales representatives will now focus on potential non-opioid products. The one that they did is something for opioid-related constipation. I just figured I would throw that in there. I don't know why. Now, let's see. Let's get into the more details here about why they're doing this. So, look, I mentioned lawsuits and criticism, right? Yes, this absolutely has to do with these lawsuits. I mean, Purdue is one of the companies that was responsible for sending about half of the 20 million prescription painkillers to a small town in West Virginia who had about, nearly 2,900 people living in that town. So that's 20 million pills spread out in the space of 10 years to a population of 2,900. That seems like a bit of an overprescription problem. And this was divided by, I believe, 2 or 3 different pharmacies. So, damn, that is a lot of medication. Why would you need that? Well, unless you are actually having this problem with overprescribing these pain pills. Now, the reason that I mentioned West Virginia is because West Virginia is ground zero for this problem. They're one of the states that have been hardest hit by this epidemic of pain pills. Now, Purdue, when it comes to the lawsuits, look, they've been fighting different lawsuits by different states, counties, and cities that have accused them of pushing these painkillers through their deceptive marketing. And again, it drives me crazy that we actually have drug marketing in this country. Now, the lawsuits have accused Purdue of downplaying OxyContin's addiction risk and of misleading marketing that overstated the benefits of opioids for treating chronic rather than short-term pain. And that is the problem. People have pain. Of course, everybody has times where they have, a short-term pain. And sometimes they'll get prescribed some pretty hefty painkillers. I've been described things like Vicodin before. So I understand, right? The thing is that when you have these more long-term drugs, well, there's more of a chance of getting addicted. Especially if you need chronic long-term care for this or chronic long-term pain relief. Now, Purdue, of course, denied the allegations in the lawsuits. It says, no, this is approved by the FDA. As if that means anything. That just means people in the FDA have been already bought off by these agencies. So now, to show you also how they've gotten in trouble in the past for doing essentially the same thing, I want to go to some of the lawsuits that were brought to them before that they lost. Purdue and 3 executives pleaded guilty in 2007 to federal charges related to the misbranding of OxyContin. They actually ended up having to pay $634.5 million to resolve a probe by the U.S. Justice Department. That same year, Purdue also reached a $19.5 million settlement with 26 different states in the District of Columbia, and in 2015 agreed to pay $24 million to resolve a lawsuit by Kentucky. So yes, they have a history of doing this. So of misbranding, using doctors to push their medications on people, also they can make a buck. So it seems like they're at fault. Now, here's the thing about them. They're a for-profit corporation. Like, this is what they do. In order to pad their bottom lines, yes, they will have to market. They will give kickbacks even, and they will do whatever they have to do to increase the amount of people using their drug. Again, they're in a for-profit business, So they're like, we got to sell this product. This is our best product. So yes, we're going to do anything we can to do that. So in that regard, they have a sales team. Now, this is a crazy thing because I never thought about it before. We're the only country, I believe we're the only country in the industrialized world that has so many advertisements for prescription drugs. I mean, look, if you watch television at all, you'll see a ton of ads, especially, for example, if you watch cable news, which of course is why cable news, the shows on cable news, MSNBC, CNN, they don't push Medicare for all because they're funded by the drug companies. But when you watch these programs, 9 times out of 10, you're going to see a commercial for what the newest drugs are. But you got to understand, they're not marketing for you. No, talk to your doctor about this and this. Talk to your doctor about this drug. Side effects include diarrhea. It's always diarrhea, by the way. It's a side effect, but yeah. So, but they're not marketing to you. They're marketing towards doctors. And they're telling you, hey, go tell your doctor, right? And they do that because this is a billion-dollar business. So the fact that this company has a sales team at all is actually highly disturbing. Even though they're like, don't worry, we cut our sales team. Now we only have 200 people that are out there doing our sales for us. Oh, well, ain't that wonderful? Now, there's one more piece here that I want to address. And that, look, some people are worried that this will hurt people suffering from pain, like chronic pain, that it might end up making these drugs less available to people with that pain. And I understand. I hear you. There are other alternatives that you don't necessarily hear. For example, there's kratom, right? Now, kratom is one of those things that the FDA and DEA, they're going after right now because it has properties that basically fit the receptors of the same receptors in your brain that are opioid receptors, right? But they can do so without the risk of respiratory depression and addiction. So you can use kratom for chronic long-term pain and also use it to get away from opioids. There's also cannabis that is also useful for long-term pain management, and that comes with no risk of overdose and minimal risk of addiction. So there are other options for these people. Yes, in states where it's legal. And what we need to do is we need to make sure that more and more people have access to this. And so we need to fight against the pharmaceutical industry because right now they have way too much control over the kind of medications that we're able to do and over our legislative process thanks to the influence of money in politics. So we've got to make sure that we fight for things like access to legal cannabis and expanding access to that, and also protecting kratom from the government's efforts to try and classify it as a Schedule I drug, despite it actually having the ability to do what some of these drugs do, but without a lot of the harmful side effects. So anyway, that's all I've got on that one. Let's go to one more story here. Favorite story of the day. Now, fossil fuels play a pretty big role in West Virginia politics. I mean, for example, you've got Joe Manchin, who's pretty much owned by the coal industry. I don't know how he can call himself a Democrat, but he does. He ain't nobody's progressive, that's for sure. Now, he's being challenged by Paula Jean Swearengin, who's actually is a progressive. Now, there are other progressives running in West Virginia as well that are also challenging the stranglehold of the fossil fuel industry. Now, one of them is a woman named Lissa Lucas. Now, Lissa Lucas is running for a state House seat in West Virginia's 7th Congressional District. Now, recently, the legislature held public hearings on House Bill 4268. Now, this House bill would allow for the drilling on properties with multiple owners if 3/4 of them, rather than all of the owners, enter into a lease. Well, that's fine for the 75%, but if you're the one person out there that says, oh, hey, wait a minute, I don't want you drilling on our land, and the rest of your neighbors agree, well, that's a sad day for you. Now, Lucas, of course, is like, hey, wait a minute, this seems to benefit corporations over regular people. I have an issue with that. And oh, look, I did a little bit of research and I found out that you're paid by these same interests that will benefit from this. Huh, golly gee, look at that. Now, during this hearing, as I said, she came to voice her opposition in a very interesting way. Let's take a look.
I'd also like to point out that the people who are going to be speaking in favor of this bill are all going to be paid by the industry, and the people who are going to be voting on this bill are also often paid by the industry. For example, and I have to keep it short simply because the public only gets a minute 45, while lobbyists can throw a gala at the Marriott with whiskey and wine and talk for hours to the delegates. So to keep it short, on the Judiciary Committee, Charlotte Lane, about $10,000 from gas and oil interests, including AEP, Marathon, First Energy, Dominion, EQT, and I could go on. Next, let's talk about John Schott from Mercer. First Energy, $2,000, Appalachian Power, $2,000, Steptoe & Johnson, that's a gas and oil law firm, $2,000, Consol Energy, $1,000, EQT, $1,000, and I could go on. Now let's talk about Jason Harshbarger.
Ms. Lucas, we ask no personal comments be made. If you want to talk about
this is not personal comments.
it is a personal comment, and I'm going to call you out of order if you're talking about individuals on the committee.
Oh, you cannot talk about individuals on the committee, especially when it comes to how much money they've received from oil and gas. No, that's a personal comment. That's a personal attack. Really? That's it. Very, very interesting. In fact, that's actually very convenient. You can't talk about how much money they've received from whatever corporation, whatever industry. Oil and gas, of course, is the one here, but what about pharmaceutical industry, right? Oh, you can't actually talk about how much money they received if there's something to do with, for example, legislation on dealing with West Virginia's problem with prescription drugs. Oh, but you can't talk about that. You can't talk about how much money these politicians get from said industries. Again, how awfully convenient, right? Now, of course, that's set up so that the politicians will never have to talk about their donors, and no other politician can ever talk about anyone else's donors. Well, Lucas, she's like, no, I'm not playing that game. In fact, here's what happens next.
So if you would just address the bill. If not, I'll ask you to please step down.
Jason Harshbarger took $3,500, about 40% of his money comes. First Energy, next Terra Energy. I want to finish. Drag me off. People deserve someone who are going to fight for people and not corporations.
That wasn't a sound problem. They cut her mic. Cut it. You're going to talk about people that are on the committee? About how much money they receive from fossil fuels? Nope. Nobody's going to be able to hear that. Security, get her out of here. How dare you talk about the politicians and the donors? Again, these politicians are voting to advance the bill because those donors would actually make money off that. Again, if 75% of the people on that land said, okay, yeah, drilling, right? And what, one person, two people, however many, say, no, we don't want that drilling because when it comes to, for example, fracking, it ends up ruining groundwater. But when it comes to coal, sorry, it was a mix between coal and oil for some reason. No, when it comes to coal, well, they can go and now, thanks to the Trump administration, just go ahead and dump their waste into streams. Do you want a stream near you to be able to be dumped in? Or again, when it comes to drilling oil and all the environmental impacts associated with that, that's stuff that a lot of people I don't think would want in their property. And of course, that's nothing to say with somebody going and specific, billionaires or companies buying out these houses. Because look, West Virginia, again, if a company comes and says, yeah, man, look, we know you're having trouble paying the bills and things like that because there's not a lot of job prospects over here. Coal mining is a dying industry and things like that. Why don't we purchase your house? Oh, you owe $36,000? We'll buy it for $50,000. We'll buy it for $100,000. And you'll buy out these houses. And then they'll say, we own all these houses and we think that we should drill here because there's oil. Well, if there's somebody there that decides, no, I don't want to sell my home. I love where I live. I love this place. And I don't want to see it despoiled. Well, what are you going to do? 75% of owners that might happen to be the company or people related to that business, that industry, bought out the rest of the homes. What are you going to do? Under this law, you're stuck. You're going to have drills in your backyard. So that's the problem here, right? So, of course, she comes out there, American hero, and she says, this is a problem for property rights. There are people out here that don't want this to happen. So I'm going to speak on behalf of them, and I'm actually going to show that the people that are pushing this bill, the people that are in support of this bill, are getting paid by these large energy companies. And look, I'm just gonna tell them, this is who's funding who. Now, how is that a personal attack? Well, I got a quote on that later on. But the corporations, again, and the politicians, they don't want you to hear it, and they don't want to hear it, and they don't want you to hear it. Okay. Now, let's talk to Z Jelani of The Intercept, and I love this, right? Now, she told him that they couldn't believe that stating campaign finance data, which is readily available, is now considered a personal attack in West Virginia. They said, quote, no personal attacks, which is a sensible rule to me. You don't want someone going up there and calling people names. But Delegate Schott construed this public campaign finance information from the representatives' own campaign finance reporting as personal attacks. And if they feel attacked by mentioning their donors, to me, they just shouldn't be taking that money. Boom. I love that. Hey, look, hey, if you're so embarrassed by your donors, then why keep taking their money? No, the truth is they're not embarrassed by the donors. In fact, they certainly weren't embarrassed when they were taking the donor checks. So what is it? What is the problem? It's about the corruption. They know that the people hate that corruption. They hate our system of legalized bribery. And so, of course, they don't want people being reminded of the fact that information is out there and that you can see exactly who owns our politicians. Now, finally, Lucas had one more message for Schott. She said, I think Delegate Schott made a bad call because if I had just read those donor, again, it's not like it's new information. It's all out there. It's not something secret that I came up with. If I had just read that off possibly in the Charleston Gazette, they would have said several speakers spoke, and one spoke about campaign finances. He brought so much more attention to it by having me thrown out than he could have if he had read off the list of donors himself. But you have to understand, they reflexively protect their donors. Again, it's that I don't even think it was conscious. Like, no, how dare you? No, you can't talk about those guys. No, they're good, upstanding citizens. They sign my paychecks. But that's why they don't want to talk campaign finance reform. Because, again, they have this need to protect their source of income. But see, that's exactly why we do need to talk about this. The fact that we have so many politicians now that are in the pockets of big business and that will rule, that will legislate on issues where normal people are pitted against those corporate interests. And if these politicians are being paid by those corporate interests, I wonder what side they're going to fall on. It ain't going to be yours. So that's why we need to talk about this. That's why it was wonderful to see her out there and taking on these politicians, taking on fossil fuels, and just pointing out the truth. This is how much money that they're getting paid by these corporations, by these special interests, and that's why they vote exactly what they do. So hats off to Lissa Lucas for exposing the real people that are in power in West Virginia. Okay. That's it for the show. We ran a little longer than I thought we would, but thanks for sticking with me. If you haven't already, please give us a like and please subscribe to the channel as well if you haven't already. Patreon.com/TYTNation. That's how you can support us. Independent progressive media. Thanks everybody for watching on both Facebook and on YouTube, and of course listening on FYI Nation. That's awesome as well. Thank you everybody for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow. Another show right here, TYT Nation, 3 p.m. Eastern. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. We'll see y'all tomorrow.